My parents were like, yeah, game's not going to get you anywhere. Well, got me a job, so.
There's also 0.1x devs. I've worked with negative 10x devs.
And even still, there's just so many places online that are telling you how quick you can get it done. Yeah, you might be able to do that, but you're just going to have so many gaps.
Welcome back, everyone. This is a very special episode of Backend Banter. In fact, this is the last episode of Backend Banter Season 1. Will we be back for Season 2? I don't know, but it won't be next week. This season is 69 episodes long, and that is absurd for a Season 1. So, I kind of wanted to prove that we could make that many episodes without stopping. I know a lot of people do a lot more than that, but I think we'll come back with a Season 2 of like a reasonably sized length, like 10 episodes or 12 episodes. Next year, something like that. But today I've got Allan Lires. Allan was the first employee I brought on to Boot.dev, employee number 1. How you doing, Allan?
Good, man. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on. I know some people have been asking about it and are in the Discord for a while now.
They want that Allan face reveal.
Yeah, they do. They definitely do. It used to be on the site like easy to see, and then we took it away for a little while, but here I am.
Yeah, I should say they want the Allan voice reveal because your face is all over the site. Your profile picture's up on Discord. They wanted the personality reveal.
Hopefully, I don't disappoint.
All right, so in this episode, we'll talk through kind of the chronology of Boot.dev, how we started it, why we started it, a bunch of the changes we made along the way. And then I think we'll also spend some time talking about like the decision making and why we decided to ship either certain courses, certain content, certain features, because that's not something we talk about a lot with in the Discord. Like we kind of tell people what we're shipping, but we don't really, I don't think we usually have the time, in these like announcement emails and Discord messages to really talk through this is why we did functional programming in Python and why it's course number 7 or whatever it is. To kick it off, can you tell the story of how and when you were hired to work at Boot.dev?
Yeah, so you and I had played Dota previously before. I don't think we actually knew each other super well, but we had some mutual friends. And I had been going to school for computer science. I'm a computer science major, and I was about a year away from graduating. And one of our mutual friends, I had told him that I'd been looking for internships, looking for work of some sort, and he actually was who told me that hey, I have a friend who's looking to have someone work on one of his side projects. And so I reached out to you on Discord, and we got chatting and went through the interview process, and yeah, that's kind of how it happened, and I feel very lucky that went the way that it did. So
your Dota 2 skills had just as much to do with the hiring process as your back-end development skills.
The gaming actually turned out, my parents were like, yeah, game's not going to get you anywhere. Well, got me a job, so we're
yeah, that friend, I'd been gaming with him for probably 4 years at that point, and I think me and you had played maybe 5 or 10 games of Dota together,
yeah,
but like
hardly any.
It was friend of a friend situation, so like I didn't know you as well back then, for sure.
Yeah, we I remember the conversations early on. It was like, yeah, I think we had played a couple times. It was like kind of what we had said. Like, yeah, I'm pretty sure we had played a few times, but it was never, we didn't know of each other or anything like that. So,
yeah.
But yeah, it was great. It was a good segue, and it was lucky because some of the stuff that I was working on in college was Vue. I was doing some Vue stuff in college, and Boot.dev using Vue, and so it was kind of like a good fit initially.
You can't do as dirty and just say that Boot.dev was using Vue. You gotta give the full story.
Yeah.
We were using Go and Vue.
There you go. Well, I have to lean in on what I actually knew because
Yeah, you
I
hadn't used
was
Go
I
yet,
was
right?
clueless with Go at all
Yeah.
at that point. I had heard of it, friends that use it, but yeah, for me it was like I had done like a few interviews before chatting with you, and like for like there was one for like a PHP position and stuff like that, and it was a big deal to me because in all of the previous interviews that I had like almost no common ground in terms of like technologies or stack that they were using. Almost all of the stuff that I had done in college is like Python and C and a bunch of JavaScript from my emphasis. So it was it was
Yeah.
like interesting to me to finally have something to like level with.
Well, so to give people a bit of a timeline on the project, I started writing Boot Dev. I remember it very distinctly. It was like right at the beginning of 2020. My wife's family was going on a trip down to Lake Powell, which is about 7 hours south of here. And I was working as an engineering manager at a company, managing a team of Go devs. There was just like three or four of us, and it was on that trip that I wrote like the first lines of code for Boot Dev. There was no courses yet. I was just kind of building the platform because I really wanted this gamified interactive thing, and I had 7 hours in the car, and so like on my laptop I'm just writing kind of the V1, or I should say the V0 of the platform, and then fast forward 2 years and it's been a side project for two no that's sorry that's not true fast forward a year and a half. It had been a side project for a year and a half. It did not grow a lot in that first year and a half. It was very small. I had like 2 courses on it. I was not doing any sort of promotions. There wasn't this podcast. Like very few people knew about it. And I made like all the normal mistakes that people make when starting a project and trying to get people to use it. At that point, about 18 months in was when you came on board, right?
Yeah, it was about. I remember you saying it was about a year and a half or so after got started. Yeah, it was. It was. I mean, back then it wasn't even boot dev. It
Yeah,
was.
that's
It
true.
was.
It was
It was QVol at
qvault.io.
that point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you did. So I was not on the project full. This is like what also is kind of unique and weird. I was not on the project full time. I was doing it nights and weekends. And when I hired you, you were also not on the project full time. You were like in school. So
Yeah.
I was like, maybe I was trying to put in like, 20 hours a week. And you were, I think, putting them in the same, right?
Yeah, initially, actually, I was like really, really slammed with school at the start. I think the first like month or so was like 10 to 20 hours a week, and it was
Yeah.
also like moonlight time. Like I would work like 6 to 10 on the days that I was available to work. And yeah, it was definitely not like full time work. I'd wake up, go to college, do my schoolwork when I'd got home, and then work on boot dev. It was interesting. It was like the first time in my life really that I would spend almost every waking minute just writing code, for school and then for boot dev. I learned a lot during that period of time.
Yeah. And it was, how long was it between when you started and we did the rebrand and created essentially Boot.dev?
Oh man, I'm gonna butcher this because I don't have the exact timeline. But I think it was like 4 months, 4 or 5 months,
You
maybe
started
maybe
in
half
like
year.
November of 2021, and I think we rebranded in the spring of 2022, right?
Yeah, that sounds right. So yeah, it was like 5, 6 months
Yeah.
about that, or more, a little less.
And at that point, okay, I'm going to pull up some historical data and we're going to play a game. Our favorite metric at BootDev to track is lesson completions. So the oldest
Oh
lesson
man.
completion, let's see if you can guess this one. We'll start here. Okay. The very first month where we had lesson completions from users on the platform. Can you guess the very first month, the oldest month?
The very first month I was there, or the
No.
oldest month that you were tracking it? Oh man, I would say in the hundreds, probably 250.
Okay, well, that's the number of lesson completions, and that's actually really close. It's 121. But what month was it? Like the time?
Oh man. Um, 2021 is the year I'm guessing, and I would say probably like March, April.
No, I started in 2020, 18 months before you joined.
Oh, that's
The
okay.
oldest month is June of 2020, and it had 121 lesson completions.
Wow. I didn't know that we were like tracking that at that point. I've seen this, like the one
Well, it's
that
just
you're
the
looking
lesson
at, the
completion
metrics.
records. This isn't like
Yeah,
analytics or anything. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and then you joined in November of 2021. So that's almost 18 months later. Now guess how many lesson completions happened in?
I think we're in like the thousands at that point, like 1,500 to 2,000 maybe.
Again, pretty close, but 5,000. 5,512.
Okay.
So a little bit more.
Yeah.
And then the next
We've come a long way.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying we've come a long way.
Yeah. No, yeah, for real. And then we rebranded in, I think it was February. And the funny thing is, actually, there was no growth between those 4 months.
Yeah.
It's 5,000 lessons.
Well,
every month.
I remember the rebrand was actually it was a little bit of a risk. I mean, not even a little bit. It was a quite a big risk because we had pretty good traffic to the platform from
To
the blog
specifically. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
And
no, go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, no, I was just saying, and then we had I remember that like process of adding all the redirects. We were on WordPress from the blog back then.
Yeah.
So that was a big step, and I remember like we didn't even like get back to where the traffic was
Not on the blog
after that,
Yeah.
after the rebrand. Yeah, we like it didn't come back up. So I remember that.
We had the application on app.qvault.io, the like what is now boot.dev. And then we had the blog on qvault.io. Like the blog was like the main thing back then because
Yeah.
I was lazy when I started the site, and I had been blogging for a few years just on like a little WordPress server, and I was just like, well, I don't really want to like buy a new domain. Oh my god, like I can't believe how stupid I was being. But I was like, I don't want to buy a new domain, so I'll just like put it on app.qvault.io. So when we did the redirects, we had to like map app.qvault.io to boot.dev and
Yep.
qvault.io to blog.boot.dev.
I spent a good probably 2 or 3 days like setting up all those redirects. I'm sure we missed. We know that we missed a bunch. There's so many from all of the different blog posts.
Well, we shipped the static site at that time, right? We converted the blog from WordPress to a Hugo site.
Yep.
So we had to like export as Markdown.
Yeah.
And then there was a bunch of issues.
Oh.
We didn't have an LLM to run it all through back then.
Good times.
Pre-Jibbity.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so that happened in February. The next significant milestone was when, let's see, did you go? You went full time after I went full time, right?
Yeah, just slightly after. It was because like you went full time and then I didn't go. Like I went like more full time because I dropped like that final semester was a lot lighter of a load. I was like just finishing up the last couple courses that I needed, but I didn't go full time until I graduated.
Right, which would have been 2023 January. I went full time in August or July. I actually can't quite. I think it was August of 2022.
Yeah.
And the reason was we raised some cash from an angel investor, specifically the CEO of a company I'd worked for a couple of years in the past, which was awesome because that gave us like we had some good growth in the beginning of 2022. So like we did the rebrand, and then for the next 5 months we actually had a decent amount of growth. And when we raised the cash, so okay, let me give you the numbers again. I don't know why I like this game, but I like this game.
No, I like this game too.
Okay, so during the rebrand, 2022 February, we had 5,000 lesson completions. When we raised the capital to go full time in August of 2022, 6 months later, how many lesson completions do you think?
I would guess not much more, to be honest. Like we had some growth, but it wasn't like a significant amount. We had like good ideas brewing at that point. I would say like 20K, maybe less, like 15K.
More actually, 30K. Specifically, 29,946. And you're wrong, actually. We had really good growth.
That's right.
Because that is 5K to 30K. We 6x'd in 6 months.
Yeah, that's a big deal. That is a big deal.
But it is small absolute values, right? Like
yeah.
So yeah, you go from 2 users to 4 users. It's technically doubling, but
it's interesting to think about because like I mean we'll get to this as we kind of continued down, the history. But yeah, it's like going from that 6K to 30K. It's like that fluctuation is it's like a big deal then.
Yeah.
But looking at it now, it's like you see that. Well, we'll get to it, but
Yeah. Okay, while we're here in like early days of Boot Dev, just after the rebrand, can you remember roughly what the curriculum was at that point? It was the same offering. It was like back-end developer learning path, but I mean, the feature set, the look and feel of the site, the content was very different than what it is today. Do you remember like the course outline?
Yeah, I don't. I think I remember like the courses that we had then. It was like we had Python, OOP, algorithms. We didn't have FP. We didn't have like our project list was also like a lot smaller. I don't think we had like it was like 70% of the projects that we have now. So I was pretty sure it was like Python, OOP, algorithms, and data structures, and then it was like JavaScript. It honestly. I'm trying to think, but at that time it might have been JavaScript to start.
Yeah, it was. I was wondering if you'd remember that.
Yeah, I think it was it was JavaScript to start, and then it like randomly went to Python. We also had a Canvas course at that point.
Yes.
That we've completely ripped out.
A graphics
but then
programming in Canvas. Yeah.
Yeah. And then it was like pretty similar on the back end. It was or like on the back end. We didn't have web servers at that point, I don't think, but it was like Go. I don't know if we had finished the SQL course by then. I don't think we had. It was like Go. It was like the end. And then it was like Capstone. I don't even. Yeah, it was like significantly
I don't
less.
think we even had a Capstone project.
I don't think we did either. Yeah.
The main difference, I think, is that when I first started Boot Dev, the vision was a little different. I wanted to build a computer science degree online, not necessarily a back-end development career path. And then it became more obvious to me that the right choice was to do back-end development specifically and kind of tailor it towards a career outcome. And that's why there was like graphics programming and JavaScript. It's like, oh, like we'll just do like generic CS stuff.
Right.
And that's when we decided to like rip out the job. Well, we moved the JavaScript down, and now we're in the process of ripping out the JavaScript, which we'll talk about.
Yeah, we gotta get rid of it.
Yeah, it was a lot shorter.
It was much shorter, and honestly, it's funny. It was significantly less fleshed out, but it still like provided a lot of value in the sense that, I mean, like the good parallel that I always draw when I'm thinking about our curriculum is like, what did I do in college versus like what are we teaching? And a lot of the beginning stuff like that, especially now, but even then, like that early section of the curriculum, with data structures and algorithms and OOP, I think that's a lot of that is like kind of lost in online learning. It's like talking about boot camps and stuff like that. You don't get a lot of the you get more focused learning there. It's like you're learning a framework or learning whatever it is to get you that job quick, but you miss out on the OOP and algorithms and data structures, which like you're not going to be building those from scratch really in a job, but knowing that stuff is so beneficial. And I've always like loved that about our platform, and like that we focus and go deep on the stuff that is important, to give you good fundamentals in engineering. It's one of the big things that I always like really, really touted about to like my friends and people like asking me what I did when I got the job and been working here. They're like, what's different? Like, isn't that like Code Academy? And I'm like, no, we go way deeper.
So the original vision for Boot Dev was computer science degree online, like essentially this idea of like there's a lot of places to learn like React in 12 weeks, but like we want to teach like computer science fundamentals. The interesting thing is like, yeah, we pivoted the name of the learning track to like backend developer career path, and like that is what it is, and that's the goal. But the idea of teaching like a really solid computer science foundation, it's there. It's just like the first half of the learning path, right? Like we just shoved it all at the beginning there. And I like to think that's one of the big differences between us and some other platforms.
Yeah, I think for sure that. And like the other thing that I've always just been like so happy that we've maintained, and I know that we'll continue to maintain, is just like the honesty in the duration that it takes. Like learning the code isn't easy, and I think for a long time, and even still, there's just so many places online that are telling you how quick you can get it done, and like, yeah, you might be able to do that, but you're just gonna have so many gaps in your learning, and like even me as like like I graduated a 4-year degree, I've been working. It's like I still have gaps, and it's like there's still things that I'm like learning every single day, even content on our platform. It's like we release a new course, and it's got stuff in there like Prime's Git course. It's like I've been using Git since I started here, and there's stuff in there that I just did not ever touch or use until now. Now I understand the deeper side of it, and I think that's just so much value. Like telling students like, hey, this is going to take like 9 to 12 months of like significant effort on your part, and just like setting their expectations in the right place. And we see the success, we see the people that have like stuck to it and done it. It's that's like one of my favorite things about working here is like seeing in the Discord when we have that like got a job channel and like people talking about the things that they've done. Like that is it's like so fulfilling to like work on the content, work on the courses, make the platform fun to do, but also like this is your path to a job, and then seeing that actually happen with students is like it's the best.
That point you made about pacing. This is something that I definitely think we have not yet perfected. We've done a lot of work on the pacing. I was just talking about this in the Discord with somebody. We have this problem where like students can get through. So the first, let me pull it up so I know I'm not lying. At least at the time of the recording, Learn Python's the first course in the learning path, and then Shells and Terminals, then Git, and then there's a guided project called Build a Bookbot, then Learn Object-Oriented Programming, and then Learn Functional Programming. So that's 6 courses. Functional Programming is the 6th course. And the problem we're running into is like for new developers, people that are pretty new to coding, getting through those first 5 courses, like you move pretty quick through the lessons, right? You're spending 5 minutes on a lesson, 10 minutes on a lesson, and then you hit functional programming. And all of a sudden, it's taking you half an hour per lesson, an hour on some of the lessons. Like it gets really hard. And we're doing like we've made a lot of updates. We're trying to like smooth out that difficulty curve, but at the end of the day, it's like it's going to take a minute.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I think there's a lot of expectation setting that we haven't done that I'd like to do a better job of, where it's like, we say it takes a year and you got through the first 5 courses in a month. At some point, like there should be an expectation that there's going to be a slowdown. I don't think we're communicating it well yet.
Yeah, no, I agree. Especially, I think that's like that course in particular is a pretty big one for this in terms of like it definitely is a step up in difficulty and step up in I think you're right on the money in terms of like time it takes to do each individual lesson, and I don't think we communicate that well yet. We have metrics now that we're like tracking that I think we can we show the difficulty now, which definitely helps, and like it's very telling in that course. Like most of the lessons in that course are pretty high in terms of difficulty, but yeah, no, I think that's another thing that we got to work on in the future is kind of setting that expectation better for the students, is like how long is like normal to spend on one of these lessons, and then also communicating that like, hey, if it takes you longer than what we deem as normal or what you think is like how long you've been spending on the previous lessons, that's okay. Like if you're using Boots, you're like chatting with Boots and like getting help or like asking for help in the Discord ideally, that's fine. Like I can't even tell you how many times in college like I went to the study lab to get help about like what's a red black tree, I don't know how to do this, anything like that. I think that's like a really really hard thing to communicate in online learning in general, like where am I at, like that, how am I doing in comparison.
Yeah.
And definitely something that I think we should focus on more as we go forward, just so that like when students hit those courses like static site generator and functional programming, that like 1-2 punch, 6 and 7 right now is like that's a big
like a left
step up.
Yeah, it's like a left hook and then an uppercut to the chin.
Yeah. It's not easy. It really isn't. Even I've done both. In like graduating, I've been working, and it's still like some of those lessons are still like I have to take a second and think about it, and like,
but like, and this is something that is like hard to like explain to students in a way that doesn't sound almost what's the word? Like excuses are being made. Because, for example, like I want to be clear about something. There is no excuse for like a bad lesson on our platform. Like I want our lessons to
Right.
be as good as they can possibly be. Like, right, explain just the right amount. Like I want our visualizations to be great. I want the assignments to make sense. Like all that kind of stuff. Like goes without saying. It's not like I'm opposed to. I mean, we make updates to our lessons, like many updates per day.
Every day, yeah.
But but this is the big but that's like hard to communicate. It is intended that some of them are really hard and make you think and make you go off platform and make you look up docs, because to do otherwise, could we do otherwise? Yes. We could write lessons that just are easy enough and the explanations are long enough and thorough enough that they just move you through it. But like that is the definition of tutorial hell. Like is us
100%.
telling you exactly what to do every step of the way. And so the intention is to have these spikes where you're kind of kicked off on your own to struggle for, an hour or two before you're kind of back into like a more comfortable pace of learning.
Right.
I think it's those spikes that where like you really see growth.
Well, it's so interesting that you bring this up because, like, just barely, like this is last week even, Matt and I and Hunter was even part of this discussion. We were kind of going back and forth in some of the course issues that were left. Matt has been recently working on some functional programming challenges, and we were talking about one of the readmes, like one of our assignment instructions for one of the lessons, and we had it very, very, the lesson like really broke down what you needed to do. It was like almost step by step, and we had this discussion where we're like, well, you know what, we probably shouldn't do that. Like we should probably like pull back on the instructions a little bit here because we want them to like right now it's like almost pseudocode, and in some cases that's okay. We do that quite a bit in like the data structures and algorithms courses, like not entirely, but it is pseudocode in the instructions. But like on some of these lessons, it's it's interesting, and hopefully those listening are interested in this. But that is like a common discussion that we have, like how much do we want to give them, because we do want you struggling. It's like awful as that sounds, it's not that way. Like we want you learn when you're in that space. There's this phrase, like the zone of proximal development or whatever. I think that's the right term. Where it's like you're not completely confused, but you're in that space where it's hard and not too easy, and that's like the best place where you're actually learning, and you're constantly in that place in college, and we constantly want you in that place on the platform. And so we're there's so many knobs that we're trying to turn and pull to make those lessons correct. And obviously we mess up sometimes, and sometimes we get it right, and that's why the lesson feedback is there. But yeah, it's something that we're constantly working on.
Can you imagine, like, so I talk to a lot of course creators, and there's a lot of really talented course creators. I've had some on the podcast who like will record a really long course and then like ship it and then like not update it for a long time. They must be way better course creators than me because we update every single day, like many, many lessons, and I still feel like there's just so much improvement that can be made to like smooth out the flow, explain things a different way. And could you even imagine if we weren't updating our courses all the time?
The quality would be so much worse. It's like it's so funny. This was years ago. I implemented a feature. I can't believe I can say years ago. This was a long time ago. I implemented a feature to show like when the most recent updates were applied to a course.
Yeah.
It like shows on the platform. And because we make so many updates, it's like all of them are like at the current month always, because we're always updating courses. There's just, the thing is like there's always something, like everyone's gonna approach a lesson differently. Someone's gonna see like faults in one point, or like and we have students from all over the world, so sometimes it's we need to like make our markdown more clear for people that maybe don't have English as a first language. But even outside of that, they're the implementations that we show for like our solutions sometimes aren't like the most optimal, and sometimes that's intentional. And we're always kind of making these like soft little updates, and it's actually awesome that we have so many like very experienced developers as well come through our platform and also clue us in on some things like, hey, this could be this this way, and we kind of like look at those and make adjustments as we need to. But yeah, I can't even imagine if it was like static and didn't change, because some of the stuff that even I've wrote, I'm like, oh man, I'm so happy we updated that.
It's interesting that you bring up that point about like the solutions not being like quote unquote optimal, because that's super true, and we get a lot of feedback that we actually just kind of have to ignore because the intention is misunderstood. For example, in the Python course, you're learning basic coding concepts in Python, and we get a lot of people that have like a little bit of Python experience go through that course, and they're like, oh, like this solution should be our list comprehension, right?
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, like it definitely could be a list comprehension, but also students haven't learned list comprehensions yet by this point in the curriculum. So we don't want the solution to use something that they haven't been taught.
Right.
And also we're trying to teach like that the intention, and this is why I'm glad we're doing this podcast, so we can talk a little bit about some of the intentionality behind some of the decisions we made. The intention behind that first section of the learning path that's all in Python, it's not to turn you into a Pythonista. Like our goal, you're writing hundreds of lessons in Python, but our goal isn't for you to be a Python developer. Our goal is for you to understand basic coding concepts, patterns, computer science fundamentals, data structures, algorithms, and pretty much every concept in those first, 9 courses, 10 if you count the maze solver, so 10 courses. It's like all applicable to like every C style programming language.
Yeah. Yep.
Some of it even to like non-C style programming languages.
Right. Yeah. I mean, in some instances, it's and that's the thing, is like in some places it's way more obvious than it is in others. Like the Python one is like very clear in the sense that like, yeah, we don't teach. I saw even the other day, it's like, why don't they teach list comprehensions? And it's like, well, that's just not our purpose. Like that's like, we're not like, you can go and learn Python a million places. Like we're trying to give you the fundamentals that you need, and our goal isn't to make you like a Python developer. And then the other which is so true, and we get this like a lot, where people are like, hey, I found a better solution, and they're using like a library dot sort method, and it's like, well, that's not really the point.
We're trying to teach you how to write a sorting method.
We're trying to teach you how to write a
how
sort.
to import a sorting method.
Like, ask that person, like, so what's that dot sort method doing behind, like, under the hood? But yeah, it really is like, I think, a huge superpower for us that we have such like granular control over each individual lesson and individual topic, and like the way that we've sorted things into chapters, we can always add more challenges and add lessons if like things are like less clear, because we don't want the lessons to like bloat super big.
Yeah, that's been another common challenge, is students will be like, this one could be so much more complete if, and then you look at it and you're like, yeah, but now it's 4 pages of text. And that is painful as a student to read through 4 pages of text. And so like the balance of, okay, how do we split lessons, and when do we just link to docs instead of like dumping all the documentation into the lesson?
Yeah, and that's also like another like form of feedback that we've gotten, which is another like hard thing to communicate, which is like, why do I have to leave the site? And it's like, well, that's a skill that we want you to learn. Like it is a skill to read documentation, like the Python documentation. Like the first time you open that, you're like, what is this? Like there's a lot of words.
Website, yeah.
Right. And so like, but that's like something that you're doing daily as a developer.
That's
when you actually have your,
like on the job. Like you will be on that documentation site a lot. Might as well.
Yeah, and honestly, like the level of accomplishment that you feel too after solving something like that, where it's like, okay, I have like the general idea of what I need to do, and then I have like these references to the docs, and you go into the docs and you find the specific portion in the docs that you're like, oh, that's what I need to do with like the syntax or whatever, and then you put it into practice and write the code, like hands on your keyboard, writing code, making it work, debugging it, testing it, and then it passes. Like that's what we want you to get into, is that like quick feedback loop of trial and error, figuring out what's going on, printing out your code, making sure it's doing what you think it's doing, and then getting that XP, getting that sweet XP.
That's the real goal. We're not
That's
about
the ultimate goal.
we're not trying to build careers here. We're not trying to become better developers. We're just trying to reach Archmage and get the coin.
Trying to get that coin.
Yeah.
We're trying to get that coin.
Okay, I want to go back to something you said. So you made this point. You're like, first half of the learning path, trying to teach computer science fundamentals, not necessarily trying to make you a Python developer. I do just want to say the long-term vision of Boot.dev is for you to be able to become a Python developer in the sense that like you're building backend stuff in Python, if that's kind of the technology you choose to specialize in. At the moment, the learning path definitely pushes you towards Go. And that doesn't mean that every graduate we've had has gone on to become a Go developer. We've even had people go on to be Java developers, again, because a lot of these skills are very transferable. But like you do all of the kind of like web servers implementation stuff in Go in the current learning path. But I just want to like clue a lot of our listeners into like the long-term vision is for that second half of the learning path, the part that's currently in Go, to kind of be choose your own technology, choose your own stack. So do you want to learn web servers in Go, or do you want to learn them in Python, or do you want to learn them in TypeScript, or do you want to learn them in probably never Java, but
Yeah, we don't we don't go there. That's a dangerous place.
we'll have to
We don't want our
cover
students.
we'll have to cover every other programming language first. Then maybe
That's last on the list.
maybe we'll do Java at that point. All right, I want to go back to our little game. So chronologically, we kind of left off at so I went full time in August of 2022, and we were at 30,000 lesson completions. You then came on full time in January of 2023, 5 months later. Now, this is also interesting. So this was the first 5 months of me being full time. And I don't know how much you remember about kind of, student growth during that period, but can you guess how many lesson completions we got when you came on full time in January?
It was pretty massive. I do remember that period of time because it's like you went. I remember you went full time, and that was my final semester. So I was like 20, 30 hours a week around that, and we made a lot of changes, just updates and in general. That's when we went to XP and changed like the game, made big changes to the game.
There was no XP
then,
on the platform. It was just like gems and just gems actually.
It was just gems. Yeah, it was just gems because I remember some of our early students. I remember some of our early students would like go and do a bunch of multiple choice lessons to like earn gems so that they could peak solutions and stuff like that.
Right, because you spent gems to peak solution and you earned gems by like getting lessons correct, and it was all gems all the way down.
Yeah, everything was like the whole economy was like gems. There was no roles, there was no level, there was none of that. Like there was no like leaderboard. That wasn't a thing. Any of that. But yeah, I would say I remember significant growth in that period. I remember how excited we got because it was like we raised and then it was like we had like this cushion for us because like now we're going full time and we're like and we it was like we were just rolling and I would guess for that lesson completion game I would say like 60,000-70,000.
Your memory is flawed.
Is it flawed?
We had negative growth for 5 months from August until December. And then in the last month, in January, so a month after you'd been full-time, it went up by another 10K. So we were at 37,000. But December of 2022 was only 23,000 lesson completions, which is 6,000 less than in August of the same year. It
had to have been the next holiday season then that I'm thinking was super hype.
Well, but you're right about a few things. Like we made a ton of changes, and you're right. It's because we had kind of that cushion to be able to do so. But they weren't changes that like immediately brought in a ton of new students. They were changes that like allowed us to then make more changes. There's a lot of like not refactors in like the coding sense, but like we were re-platforming a bunch of stuff, like adding the XP features, re-architecting how lessons work so that the XP will work, so that gems work. Like there's just a lot of that work that happened, and it's paid off as we'll talk about in just a second in the next.
Yeah,
But
this was like kind of this is kind of like what we've talked about like in the past is like we made mistakes in that period too. Like we had some features that we put in and immediately ripped out almost
yeah.
because they just didn't work. But yeah, we also like we really leaned into the gamification thing. I think we both like really liked the ideas that we had and that's definitely not something that you're like, oh, we added gamification and then it instantly like made changes. Like that had to kind of
we
sit
added
for a
shit
bit.
gamification, and we've been
did.
slowly making it better for 2 years.
We still are making it, but I
Yeah.
tweet. I'm exposing myself here, but all of the nerfs that have been happening in the gamification, that's my doing. So you can come after me in the Discord if you're sad for your XP losses.
Yeah, we made it a little too easy to level up for a bit there. I also want to point out just a little bit, because I mentioned that we raised some cash. So we raised a very small amount of money. The intention was just to be able to pay mine and your salary for like a year while we kind of got profitable. And one of the really cool things, I think we're super lucky in this regard. And I mean, obviously huge thanks to all of our students because they make it possible. But like we were profitable by early 2023. So just like 6 months later, and we've been able to grow the team. So we haven't raised any more capital. We don't plan to raise any more capital. And the partners that I raised from, like I said, it was kind of a CEO that I worked with in the past. They're awesome. They do a ton of work to help us build the platform. They're not just kind of some passive investor that wants to maximize profit. They really do help a lot, which is
They do a ton. They're just great guys too, like genuinely.
Yeah, they're here local. We go get lunch with them once a month. February of 2023 is when it kind of our kind of growth in usage jumped again, and we went from 37,000 lessons in January to 60,000 in February. So we almost doubled that 1 month in February of 23. I want to reminisce for a second about some of the old gamification features and talk through why we changed them, because I think this will be interesting to people. Do you remember the original 3 achievements that you could get in the platform?
Yeah, we had we had like the milestone one. So it was like just how many you've done. If I'm not mistaken.
I don't
it was
think
just,
we had that in the original 3.
Was it not that? Because I know one of the ones that you're referring to, which we ripped out, which I think was a great idea, which was like, how fast are you doing these lessons? Yeah, there was a speed achievement, and then there was like lessons corrected. Was it in a row? Was it like?
Yeah, so that one we still have a version of it. It's called Sharpshooter now. I can't remember what we called it back then.
It was just streak back then because we didn't have like the daily. We didn't have like the weekly streak that we have now. It was just streak, right? Remember, it was like a flame, if I'm not mistaken.
You're right. Streak was what is now Sharpshooter. Yeah. And then we had speed, and then I think you're right. I think we did have milestone. I
think it was just milestone. Yeah. It was like how many lessons you've done, how fast have you done X lessons, and then how many in a row.
Yeah.
And there was only. So like now we go up to Grandmaster. There was only like half of that. It was like
they went to Diamond.
It went up Diamond. Yeah. Diamond was the highest you could get, and like the Diamond speed was like X amount of lessons in like 30 minutes or something like that.
Yeah, it was like do 15 lessons in 30 minutes, and like the only way people would do it would be to kind of like cheat and only do multiple choice lessons, like out of order.
Skip
and then like
reading.
they wouldn't read them. They'd just like yeah, it was a nightmare. Wait, okay, tell the story of we don't have to name any names, of course, but like tell the story of we had a student that just like, okay, so the way the economy worked in this early version of Boot.dev was you had gems. There was no XP. You had gems and achievements. Those were like the only 2 things to really like earn on the platform. And to get gems, you had to unlock achievements or just do lessons.
So there was you got gems 2 ways, like the initial system, that like initial like gem economy system. You got like a big bump of gems when you got achievements, and then you got a small like gradual amount of gems every time you got a lesson correct without peaking the solution. And then back then we actually had Yeah, we actually had a hint system back in the day, which was like on maybe 8% of the lessons, maybe less. I think there was actually like 4% of the lessons. There was like occasionally you could click a hint button and that would also ding how many gems that you would get. Similar to kind of how Boots works now, but much worse.
Well, you used to not be allowed to view the solution unless you paid up the gems,
Yeah, yeah.
like at all.
Yeah,
So
you
like
couldn't.
if you were on a lesson and you were stuck and you didn't have the gems,
Yeah,
figure it
you were.
out. Like
Yeah.
there was no recourse. Um,
We had students that would go. I kind of like made mention of this before, but like, you know, I think the equivalent back then to the functional programming now was like the data structures
yeah,
course was very difficult. It was probably our hardest course on the platform back then, and a lot of students would like jump ahead and go and do a bunch of multiple choice lessons on other courses so that they could earn the gems to go back to data structures and peak solutions so that they could get past those lessons because they didn't know what they were doing, which obviously is not what we want them doing, and obviously what they don't want to be doing
yeah.
either, because that does not help their learning at all.
The game system has been a constant, like, ship a thing that sounds like a reasonable idea, watch how people actually use it, and then adjust it so that it actually encourages good learning habits as opposed to bad ones.
I think that's like, yeah, 100%. I think that's the most interesting part about like the gamification stuff and like the design behind the gamification is like you think of a game like World of Warcraft, for example, and it's like it's got a lot of cool, fun features. And yeah, we would love to have all of those features in Boot.dev, like make it the most fun game ever. But the thing is like what we want the game to do is to be a tool to help you learn. And so we see these features where it's like, man, we have people skipping and like just doing multiple choice, and you know that they're not really reading those multiple choice. They're just clicking to get it right, to get their gems so that they can go and cheat on a lesson and not learn that lesson. And which is not helping them at all, and it's also just like making them jump around, and it's probably annoying from their perspective. And then on the flip side of that, it's like you also got this like speed achievement where we're like trying to make students go really
Encourage
quick
you to rush,
through lessons, rushing through lessons, and that's also counterintuitive to what we want the gamification to do. So yeah, like you said, it's just been a bunch of like incremental changes. Like we're like, man, this is a really cool idea. Let's add these achievements, and then we see, you know, how students kind of take that, and it's cool to see the students like love the game, like want to like play the game, but you know we want to make sure that that love for playing the game is also helping them learn and,
Yeah.
and getting that. And so yeah, we, you know, obviously we ripped out that speed achievement and then made big changes to, you know, XP and gems and how that whole thing worked so that we're encouraging learning instead of encouraging gamification. But you know, you still get some people gaming the game. So
It's actually interesting. We talk a lot about how like the gamification is like to keep you engaged and keep you going and motivate you. And that's true, but it's kind of a half truth. I just really want to emphasize this point that like our core belief is that actually the game system can be used as a hint, as a like way to encourage better study habits.
right.
Like not just like it won't hurt your study habits, but like it actually makes them better than they would have been without any encouragement.
Yeah,
And like by a significant margin in some cases.
yeah, I agree. I mean, like a good example is just like the main loop of like when you're working on a difficult lesson. It's like you've got a difficult lesson and you're going to try to do it by yourself first. And you're like you're working on it and it's
For
like,
max
man, I'm really
XP.
struggling here. Yeah, you're trying to get maximum XP, you're trying to get the maximum amount of learning. Like kind of like tie those words, they can kind of go hand in hand. It's like XP learning, whatever. But you're struggling, and so yeah, maybe you reach out to Boots, and that's going to ding your XP, and but that's okay. It's like you need to, you know, you need some help, you need some, you know, some guidance in that. And I would say like before doing that, the next step that you could do to like keep your XP high but also like have that same sense of accomplishment is like go look out, like hop off site, go look up some docs, look up the different things that you can, you know, try your best to solve it on your own. And then, you know, you have these tools, you have the Discord to reach out to for help, you have Boots to reach out to, and then if you're really stuck, if you're really, you know, not able to solve it, you can peek the solution, and that's going to cost you XP, but that's okay. And I think this kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier in the communication side of things, or like things that we want to communicate. I think one thing that I would definitely recommend to every student is, if you do find yourself peeking the solution, like that should like be a flag in your head, like, hey, this is a lesson that I should try again. Like, look at our solution, the one that we provided for you. Look at what it's doing. Try to figure out, like, understand what our solution is doing, and then reset the lesson. We just implemented that new feature, but like before, you could like retry it again and try to do it again from scratch without looking at it again.
Yeah.
Because I just think, in terms of like that like whole loop of going through, like, you get that first deduction of XP by talking to Boots, and then you're still stuck, and then you drop down. It's like, hey, this topic is very clearly fuzzy, and we should probably work on it before we move on, because we move quick. We're going to use that same thing that you just learned in the next lesson. So
Yeah.
it's just going to get harder and harder to understand.
Back to our game. All right, so February of 2023, we're at 60,000 lesson completions. Now, 2023 was a big year of growth in a number of ways. Lots of new students on the platform. We shipped a lot of new courses. There's more lessons overall to be completed. And the funny thing is, sometime during 2023, I can't remember when, but we shipped a few courses, and I remember distinctly me and you having this conversation where we were like, man, as soon as we ship the SQL course and the web servers course and the CI/CD course or whatever it was, like, this backend learning track, it's going to be like complete.
Yeah,
It's
we're
gonna have,
done.
it's like, yeah, we're done. And it's hilarious because for the next year, we've basically just keep telling ourselves that with every course we release. And now I think we really are close. I think we really are like 2 courses away from deciding, like, this is the backend learning track. But it's just hilarious because we keep being like, damn it. You know what? That probably should be in the core learning path and not just like an optional thing that you learn after.
Well, it's so interesting because it's I think, like, at the time it really did feel like that. It was like we had like the CS fundamentals, like you learn the CS fundamentals, and then we had like Go and then web servers, and it was like, okay, we really like have people building back-end web servers. Like the web servers course, it's probably still my favorite course on our platform in terms of like real world application. But it was like, oh, we don't teach them anything about SQL, or I can't actually remember the order of that, but I remember when we were talking about like the SQL course, we were like, yeah, this, like, we don't do anything with database stuff yet, and like this is really like the last thing. At the time, it was like, yeah, it kind of felt like it was, and thankfully it was like we just realized, like, hey, there's actually so many more gaps that we can fill, and from the perspective of like college, that was almost like all that you get in college. It was like, yeah, you learn the CS fundamentals, and then you learn maybe like a bunch of different languages and like applications to that, and then you learn how to, like, for my emphasis, like, which was web development. When I had a web development emphasis in college, like we learned a couple front end frameworks, like very very base level, and then we did some stuff with Express on JavaScript. It was like that's about it, and then that was it. It was like, and so from that perspective, it was like, yeah, like in terms of what students learn in college, at least to some extent, depending on the college,
excluding
that you're in
like all
whatever.
the generals and like math and
Right.
stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like that was the core learning, but then we see students come through, and a huge credit to the students, because it's like, hey, this would be really really beneficial, especially those students that come in that like have a bunch of experience in development, and they're like, hey, it would be great to see X and great to see Y, and like these internal discussions that we have, like, man, it would be super helpful if we taught Docker or CI/CD, and slowly these like different things started to balloon what we see as like the back end learning path. And it's funny that, yeah, we keep saying like, yeah, this is the end, but it's also kind of telling to like the amount of skill that you need to have to really feel confident in yourself, like going and getting a job, because it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, like learning these different things, and like even to some extent we have some of the stuff in the deeper learning that I even think is like, man, that is deeper learning, and like you don't have to, but man, it's going to be useful.
And to be clear, I just want people to understand this distinction. When I say like we're having these discussions about like, oh, the backend learning path is complete, we're talking about specifically like what we believe to be like the required courses. So like
Right.
we always knew there was a ton of optional stuff that we'd want to add, things like NoSQL databases and SQL databases and Docker and Kubernetes and RabbitMQ or whatever. Like we always knew
Right.
that. So we're not saying that like there was, we assumed we wouldn't have to teach any of that. But the amount that we believe to be like in the required learning path, like before we kind of
Right.
send you out and say, hey, you should probably start applying for jobs. That's what keeps growing.
Yeah, it's like that distinction between, you have your electives in college and the courses that you're required to take to graduate. And it's like this is like that required to graduate from boot dev is and what we kind of tailor the game to like you should be reaching Archmage a little bit before or after, depending on how much you like game the game, like through this like core learning path. Yeah, it does keep getting bigger, but I think for good reason. I mean, a lot of the stuff that we've added, and it's also like goes back to kind of what you were saying at the very beginning of like this pacing. It is a little bit of like a sawtooth pacing, but the different courses, like I think, I mean, if I'm not mistaken, it used to be like learn Python OOP FP, which was like, and then after that or maybe it was learn Python
Yeah, an
OOP
original
bookbot.
assumption was basically kind of the way my college experience was, which was you're going to learn Linux on your own. And you're
Yeah.
going to learn Git on your own. And we kind of
Right.
came around to the idea that like, no, actually, we should probably teach you a lot of kind of the basics of navigating a terminal and some best practices and things to get you started. And then
Yeah.
same with Git. In fact, we actually go quite deep on Git. But originally, it just was like, oh, you'll learn that on your own, like I had to do. Like, but it's like, oh no,
I mean,
that's probably not
that's
the best experience. Like,
That's college. I did not touch Git my entire degree. I learned Git at boot dev, like working here, like, which is crazy. I mean, obviously, like I heard about it and like it had like looked into it a little bit, but never, never like worked collaboratively with someone else using Git until my first job. And it's like I look back on that. I actually got a phone call like a year and a half after I graduated or whatever, like, hey, what's feedback of your college experience? And that was one of the things I said. I was like, why aren't we teaching people, version control at the very least? Yeah, it's interesting because like there is a lot of gaps that I think like a lot of graduating developers have that we don't want them to have coming through boot dev.
February 2023, 60,000 lessons. We hired our third employee. Well, actually, second employee, I guess, if you don't count me. So, third person on the team, Hunter, was it August 2023?
Yeah, I think so.
Almost
I think
exactly
so.
a year after I went full time. Okay, so
I think so.
guess that growth. So in February of 2023, 60K lessons. How many do you think we had in August of 2023 when Hunter came on board?
August of 2023. Oh man, I'm normally great with these, but I'm gonna say 100K.
100K, 186K.
Oh man, I knew I was low. I'm
It's
trying
hard.
I'm trying to be
This-
modest.
This is a hard game. I don't think I'd do any better than you, to be honest.
What am I, like 1 for 3 now? I think I'm 1 for 3. I got to step it up.
Well, I'm asking you to give me an exact number, which is pretty unfair.
Hey, I just want to be in the ballpark. I'm counting like ballpark as a win.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, so 186K. We brought Hunter on. He was number 3, and let's see. When Hunter came, I'm trying to remember like what we were shipping about that time. Like what new things was that? That was about when the Docker course came out. Does that sound right?
Docker had been out. I do remember what I was working on when Hunter first. I was building the notification system when Hunter first started.
Like the in-app notifications, the toasts.
In-app notifications, yeah, like the little pop-ups through PubSub. I'm trying to think where we were at course-wise. I think a lot of the focus.
There was
no
shells
Git
and
courses.
terminals.
I think a lot of the focus actually at CI/CD was not out,
Okay.
so that was the one that we worked on soon. But I think a lot of the focus was on at that point projects. I think that's when we added. I think blog aggregator and static site generator. No, static site generator was after
It
FP.
was later. Yeah.
I think FP was also not out at that point.
I think you might be right. FP, I think we had mentioned earlier that we might have had FP earlier, but I don't actually think we did. I think it went
I don't
straight
think we
from
did either.
OOP
Yeah,
to algos and data structures.
yeah, you're right.
I think
yeah,
OOP
FP wasn't out
until
because
early 2024 even.
yeah, FP came out and then static site came out after FP because static site uses a bunch of functional programming stuff.
Yeah. That sounds about right.
Um,
I
yeah,
think that's
I think
about
so.
when we solidified the plan, which is funny. It's been like 8 months now. But where we kind of solidified the plan to give JavaScript
Yep.
to kill JavaScript. And we haven't executed on that yet, but it's coming very soon. In fact, by the time you're watching this episode, it may have already happened. And so let me give a little bit of history here. So, okay. Boot.dev learning path circa end of 2023 is computer science basics in Python, a tiny section in JavaScript, and the only reason for that section, the only reason, fundamentally, is so that you can learn a bit about interacting with an HTTP server as the client. So we have you writing JavaScript using the fetch API so that you can interact with a RESTful server. So where you essentially learn how to use a RESTful server. You're not building the server yet. You're writing code that acts as the client, which is a very important and necessary thing that we need in the learning path. And JavaScript just made so much sense for that course because when you write a backend server, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be developers writing JavaScript that are hitting your server using the fetch API. So that's why. But this awkward thing kept bothering us. And Allan, I mean, we went on walks like a bunch of times to talk about this. Like, how are we going to kill JavaScript? Because you have to learn like a whole language, a terrible language, frankly, that neither of us particularly enjoy, just to like do HTTP client stuff. So we have come with a plan. The plan is kill the Learn JavaScript course, take the Learn HTTP course, port it to Go. Like, we troubled about that decision for a long time because we both were pretty into the idea that the fetch API was like a better natural fit. But
I mean, it's great, right? The fetch API is I mean, for learning itself. But yeah,
it's a useful skill, yeah. But for the sake of trimming it down to just 2 languages, learning to make HTTP requests in Go is how we're going to do it. And then the build web crawler in JS, that project is also getting ported to Go. So the plan is rip out the JavaScript course. Those courses are now available in Go. But, and this is the interesting part that I think not necessarily everyone knows, all that second half of the learning path that's currently all in Go, we are porting to not JavaScript, but TypeScript. So, I mean, JavaScript, but what you should be doing, basically.
right.
And then just, I guess, one more point to make is that Learn HTTP course, even though it'll be in Go, we're going to change the name. I'm not quite sure to what yet, but I want it to be a little bit more clear that it's not about learning the HTTP protocol, like the protocol level, but it's about using HTTP at like the client and server level. And so I think we might rename it to like Learn HTTP Clients or something like that. Learn HTTP Clients. And then the Primeagen is actually working on an HTTP protocol course where you'll like write the HTTP protocol. That'll be in the deeper learning section. That's not going to be in the core learning path, but it'll be badass.
Yeah, and the clear distinction is that the port of that second half will just be it'll allow you to choose.
Yes.
It's not like we're moving Go to TypeScript, but
Right.
you can pick.
Yeah,
So
you'll
if you want to
like
do the second
core
half,
CS fundamentals in Python, and then you'll be like, the default is continue and Go, but you'll have this option to do it in TypeScript. And I think we'll actually have a lot of students, I wouldn't be surprised, that'll do the whole thing in Go and then be like, I also want to do the TypeScript one. Because it opens me up to, when I graduated with a CS degree, I was looking for jobs. I mean, lo and behold, in JavaScript, Python, and Go, because those were the languages I used a lot in college. I was also open to C++ jobs. But it's like, these are the languages I'm most familiar with I want a job in one of these languages. And I think
Yep.
a lot of our students that graduate want to have a little bit of that flexibility. Like, okay, I'm open to Python, Go, and TypeScript jobs, and we'll ship some other languages in the future too. But
Yeah, and I'm also certain that there a bunch of the students will also just like being able to do them in both. Just being able to learn all of them in Go and then learn all of them, like do them all again in TypeScript, just as practice and just just more content for them to work on. That was one of the reasons why I think the web servers course was so great. Is yeah, like we teach it in Go, but really you can do it in whatever you want, and you could do it in Flask if you want. It doesn't matter.
yeah, yeah, figuring out how to do it with Flask is a good example because it's like a really lightweight Python framework. It'll have to look quite a bit different with, I think, some of the heavier frameworks like Django and Rails, because the web servers course is very much a build a web server from, I don't want to say scratch because it's not like you're implementing like the HTTP protocol yourself, but like you're taking like raw JSON bytes, parsing them, doing your own authentication with the assistance of a cryptography library, of course. Like, we're not rolling our own cryptography, but like it's not a traditional like full stack web application like Rails or Laravel or Django. And so I think there might be a situation where we write for like the Python track, for example, where I actually think we ship that course without any framework, and just use Python has like a built-in, I can't remember off the top of my head, I think it's HTTP server library,
Yeah.
that's like pretty bare bones, kind of like Golang's like net HTTP. And then we'll probably have in the Python version of that section a course on Django or
Yeah.
Flask or something.
Yeah,
It's
like
something that
deeper
doesn't
learning
exist in,
type
yeah,
stuff.
exactly. That doesn't exist in
Yeah.
the Go version of the track. So yeah, that's the plan. Okay, now we're gonna jump all the way to the present. So when Hunter was hired in August, we were at 186,000 lesson completions. I bet you know this one. How many did we have last month in July?
Over a million. It was like it was just over a million.
Yep. 1.14 million. 1,143,000.
Which is just crazy and awesome. And like just I mean, you can even see like the Discord is just like popping. It's so cool to see all the students like enjoying it and loving it, and it.
Sometimes hating it, sometimes hating us.
Sometimes hating it.
Particularly when they hit the functional programming course and it gets hard. That's usually where the aggression starts.
Oh man.
But then they get through it and they appreciate it.
Those that do, honestly, that's the apex, man. I'm telling you, it's you get through functional programming and static site, and you're gonna have another bump a little bit in like algos and data structures, but you make it through that stuff.
I
downhill.
legitimately think once you hit, and I know there's a couple different opinions. We've heard some students say, like you said, maybe data structures is the summit, but I think once you finish the static site generator project, it's mostly downhill from there.
I'd agree.
And mostly for the reason that it's not that those are the in absolute terms the hardest things, but like it's where you have to have this mental shift of like, being comfortable looking stuff up, figuring some things out on your own. You've got a really solid grasp of all the like core coding fundamentals you need to get through the rest of the courses at that point. And so, yeah, just like by way of encouragement, like if you're around that point and you can get through that, then it does feel a lot more downhill after that.
Yeah, I remember in college, for me, I had this very clear time. I still remember, like I struggled, like struggling, like data structures, algorithms, like some of that stuff was like really rough. I remember, doing like Dexter's algorithm and doing that stuff. And I remember, I can't remember what professor exactly told me this, but he was like, you got to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And because I was always like pretty good at math and like didn't have tons of problems in like my math courses, and I remember getting stuck on a lot of stuff and like stuck with not a lot of direction. I was like, man, what do I do? Like I'm like looking over the same lines of code, like what's wrong? And I remember like just having this shift in how I would deal with those problems, and I was like, you know what? It's like I just got to keep like looking and digging and testing and trying different things, and like taking a step back, maybe going on a walk, and like just being comfortable like not knowing what to do yet, and I had that like mental shift, and everything else just got so much easier from then on. I started to enjoy being in that position because I was like, man, now I'm learning something new. I'm like gonna solve a new problem, and next time I come across this problem, I'm gonna know how to do it. And I think the Primogen actually said this. I'm gonna butcher this quote, but in one of his shorts recently, he talked about like this process of being like an engineer, where it's like you're gonna get this new task, and it's going to be really hard, and you're like, what am I doing? I have no idea what this is, and it's going to look like the hardest problem ever. And then you're going to figure it out, and you're like, man, that was actually pretty easy. And then you get another problem, and you're like, man, this is the hardest thing ever. And then that same cycle continues, and then eventually in that cycle, you're going to get that same problem that you already solved, and it's going to be the easiest thing ever, and you're going to be quick, and you're going to solve it fast. And like that's like the best encouragement I can give you. Like, it's gonna be hard, it's gonna be difficult, you're gonna have like these hard lessons, but just be comfortable being uncomfortable. Like, work on it, ask for help if you need it. That's not a bad thing to do. Just make sure you understand, and give it another try. And that should be like what you remember. Like, when you get uncomfortable, you're like, oh, I'm learning now. Like, like this is new territory.
Yeah, which is like, and this is a really interesting point because I can't remember who was talking about this on Twitter recently, but you will meet in your career as a developer, you will meet developers who on paper have 10 years of experience. And after interacting with them, it'll feel like they only have one. And then you'll also meet people with 10 years of experience that feel like they have 10 years of experience. And like the difference is the people that feel like they have 10 years of experience is because for those 10 years, they were always doing like new things. Like every year they weren't just like solving the same problem over and over again. They were solving new problems. They were being introduced to new technologies. It doesn't have to be new technologies. It can also just be new problems, same technology. It can be same problems, different technologies. But there's a lot of movement in their career, and as a result, they grow very quickly. And then there's other engineers who kind of sit at the same company. Not that that's always a bad thing. I mean, Prime was at Netflix for 10 years, but the problems they're solving for whatever reason just like seem to never change. They're just like always building like, I don't know, CRUD endpoints or something. And so they somehow can go 10 years and just get the same year of experience over and over and over again.
Right.
And so like if I would just say it's good to get in this mindset of like getting comfortable and trying to enjoy the ride, because if you want to be, a top 20%, top 25% engineer, then even after you have the job, like that uncomfortable doing new things shouldn't stop. It should just keep happening.
100%. Be that mythical 10x dev.
Yeah. I am very much in the camp of it is not mythical. I think people that are trying to convince us that 10x devs don't exist are 1x devs, and that's why. They're trying desperately to hide the fact that they're just not that good. Because I've worked with them, and they're really good. There's also 2x devs. There's also 0.1x devs. I've worked with negative 10x devs as well. It's not where you want to be. It's where you're constantly refactoring the code and making it worse with every refactor. Not only are you not shipping features, you're making it harder to understand.
Pick up all the refactor tickets and everyone not again.
Oh man. I have kept you on here forever. This is going to be one of the longest episodes of Backend Banter ever done.
Well, it was fun. I appreciate you having me.
Normally at this point when we sign off, I ask people, because all of my guests typically have some sort of social presence or thing. Do you want people to find you anywhere, like on Twitter or anything like that? I don't know how active you are.
I mean, if you want to, I will be very disappointing follow, I'll tell you what, because I'm not going to say anything really, but I am on Twitter. But more than anything, probably the best place to interact with me is in the Boot.dev Discord. So pull up in there and feel free to ping me, chat. Happy to talk.
If you're listening and you're already a Boot.dev student, go ping Allan in the Discord and bother him and tell him how much you loved or hated this episode.
Please do. Tell me all the things that I didn't say that you wanted me to say. Oh, I'll mention OCaml for those that wanted me to. I don't like it, but
That's just the one. We all know who it is.
there's just one.
There's just the one. Actually, there's two. There's two of you. I'm not going to say your names, but one of you has an OCaml profile picture, and the other of you, let me go to the Backend Banter channel, has a raccoon on a camel as profile pictures. This shout out is for you too. Thanks, man, for coming on. I'll talk to you later.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks so much. Talk to you later.